Hi, friends, and welcome to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Keating. In this podcast, we talk about it all, our parenting, our partnering, and our professional lives, because they are all a part of us, and we were never meant to do this alone.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another week of the Heartful Parent Podcast. I am excited to have you here. We are in the thick of August, and what that means is a couple of things on my end. One, we've got a few weeks left of summer here in the Pacific Northwest before our kids go back to school. I know your kids may already be headed back to school. They may already be in school. I've talked to some clients around the country who have kids that were starting school yesterday, this week, next week, in that general vicinity. And if you're in that boat, you're either feeling really excited about it or really depressed about it. I'm with you either way. But we've got a few weeks left of the summer. And so we are really working here in my household to soak up those last few weeks and to really enjoy them. We just got back from vacation not too long ago. And that, because of the months and everybody's got stuff going on, we aren't going to have any new guests on the podcast until next week. So we've been doing some sort of replays of things from the Safe Parenting Summit. And this week, we're going to dig into a topic that affects many, many of you, not all of you, but many of you, and that I hope will be helpful. So this is sort of a Heartful Habits, Heartful Parenting week where I'm going to share some ideas, thoughts, and strategies with you all around the issue of sibling rivalry, sibling fighting. So whether you are already back at school or school is still, 3 or 4 weeks away for you, if you've got more than one kiddo, you may have had the experience over the summer or at the start of school of your children, whether you've got 2 or 20 of them, fighting with one another, right? Sibling rivalry, feeling combative, getting combative with one another, poking the bear, right, with each other, or maybe even getting competitive with one another, and then that sort of devolving into nothing good. I've got 2 daughters, and although we have a generally pretty peaceful household, and I think part of that I can attribute to the fact that, my older daughter is almost 15 and my younger one is 7. And so because they don't have the same toys, same interests, the same friends, or sort of overlapping, toys, friends, interests, there's just less things for them to fight about. And yet they still get on each other's nerves. They still like to poke the bear occasionally. They're up in each other's space. And there are just things that they, can't agree on, especially over the summer when we were traveling together. There were moments where they were just irritated with one another. And so, this happens in my household too. Even, no matter what you do as a parent, you can be the most peaceful, positive, disciplined style parent, and this shit still happens and you'll still go nuts sometimes. So I want to spend a little bit of time today talking about how that dynamic develops, or the dynamic that we as parents might be developing or inadvertently creating, why it develops, and then some strategies for dealing with it. So first, let's talk about kind of what it is and what's going on with our kids. So it makes us crazy, but actually sibling rivalry is totally normal, in most circumstances totally healthy, and in most circumstances a really wonderful benefit of having more than one child, if you have more than one child, because it is an early learning ground for social dynamics, for problem solving, for social skills, for relationships. And it provides a different learning ground than the one between parent and child. Now, if you have an only child and you're listening to this, and I was an only child, I grew up as an only child, you can foster this sort of learning with friends, right? You don't have to have more than one kid for a child to grow up socially well-adjusted. But if you have more than one kid, you've got the learning grounds, right? The laboratory right there in your home. And that can sometimes make it a little easier. So although it might make us crazy as parents, especially when it's happening in the car or when we're on vacation or if we're at an event or when we're at the grocery store or whatever it is normal, healthy, and great learning grounds in almost all circumstances. Now, I say almost all because certainly there are dynamics that can develop where it's not healthy, where there's a real power imbalance, a real power differential. One child might have some mental health challenges or some diagnoses that could make that really dangerous or unhealthy. But, in most circumstances, it's going to be a healthy learning space for our kids. So with that as the backdrop, we can perhaps reduce some of our own irritation by remembering that our kids don't have the same social skills or the same problem-solving skills that we do or that most adults do. And even though it annoys us or irritates us or pisses us right off, what's happening is learning. And when we can put ourselves in that mindset, we can sometimes help reduce our own irritation. But let's talk about how it kind of often develops and the dynamic that I hear about from a lot of parents who I work with in the Heartful Parent Academy, my private coaching clients, or parents that reach out to me through social media or by email, expressing or kind of sharing what's going on with them. And what we often see, unless you've got multiples, is we've got one kiddo who's born, and then 1 year or more later, we have another kiddo who's born. And we like to say, well, but I'm raising them in the same way, or I'm raising them in the same family. Why can't they just get along? And it's really important to remember, and we could have a whole nother episode about this. Our children are never, ever, ever born into the same family, and they are never raised by the same parents. So especially if you've got children of different ages, they're not born into the same family, because you are a different parent with your first child than you are with your second child or your third or your fourth or your fifth. You are naturally going to be a different parent, and the dynamic and the makeup of the family is different. Your first child is born into a family that didn't previously have any children. Your second child is born into a family with one child. Your fifth child is born into a family with 4 other children. Those are different families, and you are a different parent each and every time. Similarly, we are never the same parent for boys as we are for girls, no matter how hard we try to be. We just never are. And even if you were theoretically capable of being the exact same parent for every child, whether they're, regardless of their gender, regardless of their age, regardless of their birth order, even if, it were even possible for you to be the same parent, your children are different. So they are going to interpret your parenting differently. And sometimes the way that we parent can inadvertently add to sibling rivalry or sibling dynamics that aren't always fun or healthy or great for us to be managing as parents. And what we often see is, we've got this one child who we love and we adore and we protect with all our heart, and they grow and they develop and they get skills and they get, verbal, and they can move of their own volition. And now we've got this second baby that we need to protect. And our first baby, who has opinions, thoughts, feelings, and can move under their own power, might not always be super kind to that baby because they've got big feelings about it. And they're trying to figure out what is their role in this new family. And so they do things like poke the baby, hit the baby, kick the baby, yell at the baby, put a blanket over the baby, do all sorts of things. And we get frustrated and we get mad because we're trying to protect this new little life right? And we start to think of our older child as the villain and our younger child as the victim. Now, this is, obviously not true in every family. Sometimes as they grow, we start to think of the younger children as the child as the villain and the older child as the victim. But oftentimes when I'm talking with parents, it's my older child, should know better, and they're not being kind to the younger child, and they're taking the younger child's toy, or they're doing X, Y, or Z. And or we have different gender children, and one is easier for us than the other, and so we think of one again as the victim and one as the villain. Oftentimes boys get villainized, girls get victimized in that sibling rivalry or sibling dynamics. And when we think of them in that way, when we rush to judgment about who's at fault for something, we inadvertently foster that dynamic, right? So I want you to think about your own children and ways that you have, again, maybe inadvertently thought of them in those terms. Bad kid and the good kid, the tough kid and the easy kid, the villain and the victim, right? And how that perception has maybe influenced their interactions and dynamics with one another, and maybe perpetuated negative behaviors that you don't like and that they don't enjoy, but that continue to happen because of those of our perpetuation of that dynamic. So that's the first thing. And you've probably heard me say this in other contexts, that the most difficult part of parenting is really reflecting on ourselves. And we have to do that when it comes to our kids, and say, how are we maybe making this worse? Okay, the second thing to realize is that sibling dynamics are more often than not, I would venture to say 98 to 99% of the time, more about us than it is about them. Put differently, what I'm saying is that it's often a way for our children to get our attention, or to for them to sort of subconsciously reinforce their role in the family, even if that's as the villain, right? Even if that's as the bad kid, they are looking to kind of reinforce and be like, they might have an inner dynamic or an inner messaging about, I'm bad. Well, and now I know I'm bad because my mom has said I'm bad, right? And so when they get into these battles with their siblings, it is often more about us than it is about the sibling themselves. And we know this because many, many times the fights between them either happen in front of us or migrate to where we are physically, right? It is oftentimes rarer to hear them fighting, especially with younger children, but older ones too, to hear them like fighting in a part of the house and not involving you in any way, at least until we talk about the strategies we're going to use today, right? They will often either move that fight to where you are so that you feel obligated to get involved. They'll start the fight where you are so that you feel obligated to get involved, or they will come to you for help resolving the fight so that you feel obligated to get involved. And the reason that that is often happening is because it is a way of getting your attention. And whoever did start the fight, and we don't always know, we think we know, but we don't always know, whoever started that fight is maybe subconsciously, and again, this isn't like a conscious thought on their part, but they may be subconsciously thinking or feeling disconnected in that moment. And we know that kids will settle for attention in the absence of connection, even when that attention is negative. So even if they know that you're going to yell at them and, get mad at them and make them go to their room, that's attention that they're getting from you. And so those sibling fights often become more about us. And so that's where the 4 Bs come in. And this is a positive discipline approach to sibling rivalry, sibling issues. And the first thing that we want to do, and this isn't one of the Bs, but the first thing that we want to do is get out of that victim and villain dynamic, bad kid, good kid dynamic, bully and victim dynamic, right? We want to get out of that by the way Dr. Jane Nelson says it is we want to put both kids in the same boat. In other words, we don't want to say, and I'll use my own kids' names here. I don't want to say to my older kid, Macy, stop being so awful to your sister, right? Knock it off. You always do this. Or Marin, your sister has told you that she wants time on her own. Stop going in her room, right? What we want to say instead is treat them evenly, treat them equally, where we are not picking a favorite in the fight. And what that looks like is saying, hey kids, seems like y'all are having a difficult time getting along, or it seems like you're having a hard time together resolving this issue, right? And what I've done there is I've treated them the same. I've created equity between them. In other words, I'm not going to say it's Macy's fault. I'm not going to say it's Marin's fault, even if I think I know whose fault it is. And side note to that, we often think we know whose fault it is, right? Because maybe we hear the fight start and it's our older kid picking on our younger kid. But what we don't realize is that 3 hours earlier, the younger kid went into the older child's room and took their favorite shirt and drew on it. And they didn't tell us, they just bided their time till they could get back at their big sibling, right? So we don't see all the dynamics that are present. We don't always know what's actually gone on. And because of that, we don't always know who's actually the quote unquote, the one to blame. And so it's dangerous when we then pick a winner, when we pick a favorite in the fight, and much safer to put them in the same boat. It seems like y'all are having a difficult time here, if we have to say anything at all, right? And why I say if we have to say anything at all, that's where we get into the 4 Bs. All right, so here are some strategies that I would invite you to try next time your kids are at one another's throats. And I'm going to list what the 4 Bs are, and then we'll talk about each of them for just a minute. There's bear it, beat it, boot them out, and build it. Okay, what do I mean by those? So bear it means that so in all of these, we're pretty much going to refuse to get involved. And at the most, we'll say something like, yep, seems like y'all are having a difficult time working this out. I wonder how you're going to manage it. But what bear it looks like is, let's say our kids break out into a fight right in front of us. We are going to do our best if we're in the room, or even if we're not in the room, we can go to where they are. We're going to do our best to make eye contact with both of them, or 3 of them if there's more than 2 kids involved. We're going to make eye contact with them. We want them to know that we see what's going on, but we're not going to say anything. We're going to sit down in the room where they are, preferably with a book or a magazine. And I say a book or a magazine as opposed to our phones, because our kids often see us on our phones, chances are. And so it may not have the same impact. But we want to pick something up, a book, a magazine, a notepad where we're taking notes, whatever it is. And after we make eye contact with both of them, we sit down and we carry on what we're doing, saying nothing. And if they say, Mom, Dad, my brother did this, what you're going to say is, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how you all are going to solve that together. Again, refusing to pick sides. Okay. So that's bear it. It's where we sit in the same room as them, but we don't do anything to fix the problem for them. This often happens, or can happen if you're in the car and they start fighting. You might pull the car over, look in your rearview mirror, make eye contact with both of them, and then say nothing. Pull out your phone or a book or whatever, and sort of do what you're going to do and wait for them to resolve it. Chances are you're going to shock the hell out of them. They're going to be like, what is Mom doing? why aren't we driving? And why isn't she getting involved? Why isn't she saying something to us? And they might say like, Mom, what's going on? You can say, oh, I'm just waiting for you to solve your problem. Right? We'll get going when you two are getting along again. Again, not creating a winner or a loser in the whole thing. So that's bear it. The next one is beat it. It's very, very similar. And beat it is where we, again, if we're in the same space or we need to go to where they are, we make eye contact with both of them. We might even have an expression on our face like, what is going on? But we make eye contact and then we leave the space. We walk away. Sort of to say like, I'm not going to sit here while the two of you do this. And if they come to where you are, you can get up and move. And if they follow, you can say, whoa, 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 I'm going in my room, or I'm going in the kitchen, or I'm going to go in the living room. Why don't you two stay here and figure out what's going on and work this out on your own? And we can even instill some confidence. I believe that you can figure this out together. I trust that the two of you can solve this problem without my help. And that's what beat it looks like. We, again, make sure that we're always putting them in the same boat when we say something. We let them know that we feel very confident they can manage it. And then we hightail it out of there. And chances are, without you as an audience, the fight will either end or they'll figure out how to solve it. Trust me on this. Trust me on this. All right, the third option is boot them out. And what boot them out it means is that we basically say, instead of us leaving the space, we send them out of the space. Hey, it looks like the two of you are having a really difficult time managing, playing nicely together. Looks like you guys are struggling over who gets to play with that toy. Until you can figure it out, I'm going to have you all go in the backyard. I'm going to have you all go upstairs and figure that out together. I don't want to listen to it right now. Right? Again, not picking a winner, not getting nasty about it. We're not yelling at them. We're just saying, hey, it looks like you need to work this out. Why don't you go work it out outside? Or why don't you go work it out upstairs? Now, I have a lot of parents say to me, but what if it's come to blows, right? What if they're actually physically fighting with one another? In most circumstances, strategies don't change. Now, if you're truly worried about someone getting hurt, that might be a perfect time for boot them out with a division, right? Where you say, hey, in this family, we don't hurt each other. And it looks like the two of you are having a difficult time managing this thoughtfully or with your words instead of your bodies. I'm going to have you all break it up and go to separate spaces until you can solve this problem kindly. Again, no yelling. We're not taking sides. We're simply dividing them up and saying, we're booting them out, but we're separating them. You all can come back together when you can play nicely. All right, so that's bear it, beat it, boot them out. The fourth one is build it. And this is an important one to remember because if we are going to express our confidence in our kids solving their problems together, there may be a necessity sometimes that we help them build the skills, right? Because social skills, problem-solving skills, compromise, all of those things are tough to learn sometimes, and they sometimes require guidance from us. And so we need to remember that sometimes they will need our help building the skills. But I don't recommend that you do that in the moment. I recommend that you build those skills by having regular family meetings. And if you need support on that, we've got a whole module on that in the Heartful Parent Academy, and I've done a previous podcast episode on that. That's a great place to learn collaborative problem solving. You can do that by having a peace table in your house where when everyone's calm, when emotions are stable, when nobody has a flipped lid and is losing their shit, you bring them to the peace table and you sit down and say, it looks like the two of you are having a difficult time. Let's talk about some skills and some ways that you could solve that. And maybe you act as the mediator or the moderator, but again, not taking sides. You may just wait until they're calm and talk to them each individually and help them with some problem-solving skills. That's the build it piece. So I'm not saying you need to go hands off entirely. Our kids do need our guidance. They do need our boundaries. They need the bumpers up on the bowling alley, right? That helps them get that strike. at the end by teaching them all those things I mentioned: compromise, social skills, problem solving, back and forth discussions, right? Not using their bodies, right? Emotion regulation, emotional management. They need us to help build those skills. As we help them build those skills, we can also let them figure it out some on their own, right? Remember I said this is the learning ground, and we can use those 3 strategies of bear it, beat it, boot them out. All right, I'm gonna leave it there, and I would love to hear from you. What circumstances are coming up between your kids? How are they fighting? As you reflect, how have you maybe inadvertently been sort of perpetuating those arguments? Drop me an email, Christy@theheartfulparent.com. I would love to hear from you, and then I can maybe do a follow-up episode where I talk about specifics. So send me your situations that's happening between your kids, and we'll talk about how to apply these strategies, how to help them build those skills, and how to stay out of it so that you're not inadvertently perpetuating some dynamics that you don't enjoy and that they don't enjoy either. Drop me an email, or better yet, join us in the Heartful Parent Academy, where you can get one-on-one support for whatever is happening in your family. You can go to theheartfulparent.com, click on the Heartful Parent Academy, and join there. All right, I'm going to leave it there for this week. I hope this is helpful. I look forward to seeing you next week for another episode of the Heartful Parent Podcast. I will be back with a super awesome guest next time, and I hope you'll join me. Whether you started school or you're soaking up those last few rays of summer, enjoy, have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.